You've known Jordan Peterson for a long time. He is a person. He is a human being. He has his own family. He has his own life. But at the same time, there also seems to be this Jordan Peterson that people are just familiar with thanks to 4chan, the internet, thanks to all of this culture. Do you believe that at that point, somebody like Jordan Peterson or any kind of celebrity, e-celebrity, maybe all of us to a certain extent, end up becoming something different, something that's not exactly us to the people who are observing us?
I think that's true. I think it's very much possible. Like, let's say someone like Madonna, for example, like she just basically became the whore of Babylon, took all of it on, and then people have been competing with her to kind of embody that meme, you know, and so it is definitely possible to embody patterns, more cosmic patterns, let's say. I think that Jordan has possibly fallen into that. Even he understands that it's not necessarily the healthiest thing when that happens, you know, because you can become subject to forces that you're not at all in control of. And then you become, can I say this? You can just become a vehicle for something bigger than you, but can also devour you.
Jordan a real guy, or is he a meme? He's most certainly a meme, but behind it, of course, there's a real man, and he's a real man with a lot of heart as far as I can see. But he's obviously struggling, and he's going up there and he's saying things that are essentially like very, very strong statements for our modern culture. Not really that strong in the context of history. It's very sensible, if you want to put it this way. But because they're such strong statements, it's like he's poking on the collective, if you want to use those type of words. And that's quite dangerous, because that's like poking on a dragon, and then the dragon comes out to play. And so, for example, a lot of people would say stuff like, oh, he's like internet dad. Millions and millions of people who are single parent households and stuff like this, and they're looking for a father figure, someone stable to give them guidance and give them direction. And Jordan comes up and he sort of fits that, I don't know if you want to call it an archetype, that slot, that need, that urge, that meme, whatever. And Jordan is partly like that, so he starts to fit into the role. Of course, there's another whole wing of people who hate their fathers, and they start to project that onto him as well. And this becomes a very, very difficult problem, because Jordan starts to get sort of possessed maybe by that role. Like, he starts to act more and more in that role. And then, of course, people signal towards him that you're good at this role and start doing it. I remember in one thing he started to talk about, like, someone had a dream about him. I don't know if you remember this, but he said that one of his patients or fans took DMT, I think, ayahuasca.
Yeah, it wasn't a dream, it was a trip is what it was.
Yeah, it was a trip. I think some force came and said to him basically, Jordan Peterson is the masculine vessel for this world, and he's like Socrates or something like that. And Jordan said that, and you could see that Jordan was sort of like half chuffed but half a little bit overwhelmed. He was sort of like, oh, I don't know about this at all now, like this is definitely dangerous. But what you could see was him, the collective is filling him up, but also putting him in a very dangerous position. And this is hard. Jung would always warn that this is fucking hard shit. Be careful, because it can take it away from you at an instant. Napoleon, for example, used to talk like that. He was like, when I was at my peak, I felt like I was driven by a force beyond myself. And when it was finished, I could get blown over like a leaf. And there was almost like he was possessed.
And Alexander was like that. Supposedly, he would just completely vanish in battle and just become a complete, you know. You all have to also understand that Jordan is very much Nietzschean. He's a Nietzschean, coming to the end of Nietzsche and realizing that just because of the human makeup, the idea of will to power as an individual act is impossible, because of the 95% of processes which are basically behind your consciousness. Basically, the givenness of the world. The world is so given, and it's so already hierarchical in its presentation to us that it's nearly impossible. And so what he ends up formulating is something like Jacob wrestling with God, rather than Jacob saying God doesn't exist. It's like, I'm not going to say God exists, but I'm going to fight. I'm just going to keep fighting. I'm just going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And I'm neither going to give in to God, and neither am I going to give in to the nihilism, but I'm going to try to hold that in between space, you know, and that's a crazy space to stand in.
How would you define giving in to God?
I mean, understanding that things are beyond you, like just really understanding that being is given completely, and that there is every aspect of reality is pointing beyond itself and pointing towards the good, and then giving yourself to that. It's about attending to something higher than you in communion with others too. It's not just a solitary act. It is about the communion of love, by which I think the world holds together. And that has to happen with you focusing above, you know, focusing towards something which is beyond you.
Exactly as John was saying, like, Jordan's dealing with the Nietzschean problem. He's up there on stage, he's forming that sort of masculine principle, the vision of the guiding male energy in the world. Like, people drive to that. Everybody just goes, and they all grab onto it. They're like, yes, finally someone's just telling us to clean our rooms. Like, you know what I mean? There's just so much power. Like, why, first of all, did he get into that? And what was the sort of central struggle for him? And you listen to a lot of what he says, and he keeps on coming back to this phrase, the death of God. He says this is the big thing that's like the knife in his soul, the struggle in his soul. He's like, what's going on? He's always talking that we're in this crazy crisis where you've got this death of God. I think Vervaeke calls it the meaning crisis or something like that.
Yeah.
This set of problems that are premised on something after going wrong around about Nietzsche's time. Jordan's way of stepping up to that is precisely as you're describing, you know, like the victory can be achieved when you start to order the world around you and hope that it's going to take you in the right direction. I think he often uses the Sermon on the Mount. Aim for the highest good, do it every single day. Well, don't obsess about the future and just try to like order the steps in front of you. Clean your room, clean your house, clean your country, whatever way you want to look at it. And this becomes his sort of shtick, if you will. And he goes and he presents this to the world as like a shareable shtick. Like, we can all do this, and it's probably not going to turn out bad if we at least do this. Like, you know, maybe it won't be the most romantic, crazy thing like Nietzsche's proposition of making the Ubermensch, but my God, like, it'll probably do something. It'll probably make things a little bit better. I think that's actually quite interesting to look at that as the foundational problem, because what you see then is him getting caught up with that and having to live up to the idea of being the perfect father, the perfect man. And then, of course, like the tragedy of human existence, just giving him a hard fucking do. And then everybody's suddenly like laughing at him and making a show of him, even though he was, well, you know, it's the way things work. And Nietzsche's actually so similar. It was so similar in that he's talking will devour Ubermensch, and he ends up hugging a horse, screaming butt naked while his sister takes care of him. Like, it's a sort of ironic collapse that's going on there as well. And what Jung was saying in that Zarathustra passage is precisely this. Like, what happened is Nietzsche was he was like the first guy to discover Bitcoin. You know, he's the first person to really hit on the death of God problem and be like, whoa, dudes, bro, like, this is bad. What do we do? Hit the panic button. We got to figure something out like this. And it like kind of knocks him, throws him for a fix, and he spirals pretty hardcore. And maybe you could psychoanalyze him and saying his own dad dying definitely didn't help with stabilizing his mind and all this type of stuff. And what Jung said is that when you get hit with that amount of emotional stress, and it's really weird for us, we struggle to understand, especially as moderns, how emotionally stressful it would have been for people in the past to deal with this. And as Jordan Peterson said before, Tolstoy thought about hanging himself when he really thought about the death of Christian belief, if you will. And the response to this, when you're in a position of crisis, you have to dig. Did you ever hear that when you're like a boxer and a boxer has to dig deep? And it's like, what do you do there? You're digging deep. You're trying to find something that's lower inside of you, more ancient, more deeper, more primal, more powerful. That extra bit of animalistic power that can push you through the last 4 rounds or something like this. And this is what begins to happen with Nietzsche and Zarathustra, and possibly even Jordan and whatever his project was all about. He gives birth to Zarathustra. Zarathustra is an answer. Zarathustra is like an eruption of... He dug deep and he found Zarathustra, and Zarathustra popped out of him and started to speak to him in some sense and say to him, it's almost like a dream or a symbol or a meme that showed up with Nietzsche, and it like sort of possessed him and gave him a possible path, a way forward. So he energized him with something and said, you know, here's a solution to the death of God. It's an absolutely crazy thing when you really think about it that way. And this is really what Jung was warning, is that Nietzsche might have like been possessed, if you want to talk about it in classic terms. And his possession was a cause of reacting to or trying to solve this very, very intense problem. I believe that like all of us are still kind of clashing with it as well. It is like reaction to the death of God. Suddenly, as Nietzsche said, we are now the children by ourselves on the island, and we have to stand up and take responsibility. And if we don't, we could be in an awful lot of trouble. And there's a lot of huge connotations that come from this. Like, do we choose childish ways of going forward in the world? Maybe Marxism is a childish way. Maybe whatever we're talking is a childish solution. And we really got to stand up and assert responsibility and assert a new vision of morality, either to redeem morality in its old way or actually find a whole new way that we look at it going forward or something like that.